Hello and welcome to another episode of Global Pause, Rethink the Future. So in today's podcast, I want to talk about giving and receiving, and if does giving and receiving, I should say, does that actually influence through our giving and receiving the way how we give and receive ourselves? So does the way our culture actually define ourselves, as it were, through the way how we give and receive to other people. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So let's think of, if we're market orientated, what does it presuppose? How do we define ourselves outside being, say, a consumer? So we're just looking at it from, or maybe what is the thing that we're focused on? It's presupposed that it is life, but then the way how we receive life, how do we reduce our receptivity towards life, I suppose, is one way of looking at it, because, it's always, as I always say, it's the way towards, it's not the end that we presuppose. So if it is the way or the mediation towards, and yet that filtering, as it were, the filtering of receptivity of the way how we receive life, there's a kind of qualitative moulding, as it were. It kind of shapes the way how we receive it. So if we're receiving life through the market, and yet what is our relation, our receptivity, but then what does it presuppose when we're market orientated? So how is our receptivity, I suppose, given to us in that regards? Now, it's given through interest. I suppose we have an interest towards, when we have an interest towards life. It seems strange to kind of put it like that, but I suppose it's marginal. I always say that it's marginal, because what is interest other than something that's marginal? Just think of interest that you would accrue on a term deposit or whatever. It's interest, so it's always marginal. So is there a claim towards life that's holistic beyond the marginality, is where I'm going. Because if it's interest and you consider what interest is, well then, is that interest kind of representative of how marginal we are towards it? We have a receptivity of our interest, or our, if we can say, our want, but then does that not, the orientation towards life is kind of slight in the sense of that it is only an interest. And so, what is politics other than just the domain where the decision-making apparatus can be captured by, special interest. So why is that interest so special? And, if that's the case, if our way of life is about interest, then why would we think it otherwise, wherever there are centres of power, that interest is not obviously given there as well? It's obviously more special than you. But so the way how we receive ourselves as being marginal, because our receptivity towards life is interest-based, and we instrumentalise our existence, if you consider what it means to have an interest, when we're all sharing an interest. We're all sharing an interest. Say, what does that mean when you say that you're sharing an interest? Well, it's like, I have an interest, I have an interest in whatever. Is there a way that there's a bit of distance between you and your interest, because it sounds more like a pastime or a hobby? I have an interest. To be engrossed with something, or to be, can you be interested in, say, philosophy? I don't know whether or not you can say that, because to read philosophy is not to say that you have an interest in it. I don't even think you can say you have an interest to questioning your way of life, because, how does one have an interest towards questioning life when life, even the way you frame it kind of indicates the kind of distance between it. If you're saying that you got to, you're interested in philosophy, but if we consider what philosophy is, the love of wisdom, well, what is love is all encompassing in that regards, and wisdom is something that is beyond interest, because what does wisdom presuppose? Maybe a rigorous form of questioning, maybe a knowledge or an understanding that has come about that goes beyond just a mere interest to something that's more a meditation. Can you say that you're interested in meditation when you're doing meditation? I think not. So when you're looking at our interests, what's my interest or whatever, does the way how that we are receptive to life obviously inform the receptivity of ourselves, and invariably in the way how we are towards other people? It's only like, if there's an angle, I always say that the way how this thing works is it works marginal because it presupposes where we are. But if a person's got an angle, what do we mean when we say that? Well, there's obviously there's this kind of interest that they are working on in order to exploit, in order to achieve an end. So in the context of giving and receiving, so the receptivity towards life, if it's interest-based, can we receive life holistically if the way that our way of life, so our way towards it, kind of substantiates interest as a way towards life? Can we ever receive ourselves holistically, I suppose is what I'm getting. I always use the term in indivisibility or in that regard, so where you're whole. So if that, because that's our everyday interaction with other people is like our interest or want, and so the marginal way that we receive life, we receive it through other people. Now, why is that? The marginality works through maybe the opportunity within it to be market orientated, but I always talk about the preeminent good of your time is what underwrites want, so interest. And so why would we think that if we're looking at life, why is it that when we think that, yep, giving and receiving, I'm receptive to life, through how I define my interests, but that just presupposes that receptivity has something that lays claim to that interest. And so why would we not think, well, can't we remove interest, and so therefore the claim, our receptivity towards life, if we remove that, would also be holistic in its approach as well. It would be beyond interest, because if we receive ourselves as marginal, and so therefore we always have an interest because that's the way how we receive life. Well, then to remove interest is to bring to the fore what is always presupposed as preeminent anyway. So if you work back, well then does that not implicate the way how you give? So let's think about that. So how do we give? All right, we give, we're talking about averageness. The way how you give is that you give yourself as a means towards. Well, what does the means mean? Well, the means means that you are valuable, that you are of service, or there's something that what you offer is valuable enough for you to be a means towards that. Okay, so does that mean to say that the way how we give, well, what's the context for our giving then? Now, we're not giving in the sense that we're giving. We're giving to receive. But if our giving is based on the interest, and the interest is marginal, and it presupposes that the way how we are receptive towards life is interest based, well then the way how we presuppose through our giving and receiving, it kind of creates the loop where it substantiates the way how that we give and receive ourselves as marginal. Because if I am a means towards the end, and my receptivity towards life is the way how I receive life, say, through my wants, because we're talking about interest here, and then it's the want of life, even knowing it would presuppose the indivisibility of our lives, but we have to consider the way how that we presuppose life, the way towards it, which is to be a means towards an end. So therefore to secure your time as a supplement. So the way how we receive and the way how we give ourselves and the way how we receive ourselves creates a loop where we give and receive ourselves as marginal. Now that's not necessarily, I won't say our fault, we habitualise the unacculturation. So in that regards, if we are problematizing our way of life and we're opening up a question to consider the way how we give and receive, well, if you did that in a different way, would you not give and receive yourself qualitatively differently? So if we give and receive ourselves in the sense of our interest or our becoming a means, so, about want. And so we are marginal because we are both a means and an end. The marginal way that we receive ourselves when we produce time as an economic good. I've talked all about this in other episodes. And the way how you can never fully be present because you're always a means towards an end. So that unavowed utopianism. So you can never, when we're giving, we're always compromised in our giving because we presuppose an end for ourselves. And so that's the interest that we're working towards. And so our giving is always marginal. It's always kind of conditional. And that conditionality is the interest that we presuppose as the end. So when you're looking at the way how you can inhabit your life as far as the indivisibility of your temporality beyond a means end continuum, if you don't problematize our way of life and it being market orientated, the way how we give and the way how we receive, you're never going to potentialize the indivisibility of your temporality. You're just never going to do it because you are a means towards an end, and the marginal way how that you give and the way how you receive. So literally the way how you give and the way how you receive is literally the way how you receive yourself and the way how you give yourself. So let's step back. And why is that important? Well, it just presupposes that if we are a means towards the end and it's marginal, and we're presupposing looking at the end, then the end here is to give of yourself as an end. All right, is to never be a means towards it. Now, why is that? Because if you get, and this is talked about all the time now, but it's usually in the context of this unavowed utopianism. People will talk about, being a creator, but the context for creation is a life. They're not looking at this thing civilizationally, or they're not looking at it culturally, or they're not looking at the way he can potentialize culture because it's fucking hard. Because you're dealing with other people. You're dealing with basically a greater good than your own time. If you don't potentialize that, then all of the rhetoric that will go in towards, all that shit about manifestation and stuff is just a big crock of shit. It doesn't potentialize anything that's not already given if you are beholden to an unavowed utopianism. It's just not. You're not potentializing a common surpassing. All you're doing is securing independence against. So any of that kind of framing this thing, if it doesn't address the relational nature of the way how you give and the way how you receive yourself to potentialize the relation that's presupposed, but we never question it, well then it engenders nothing basically. So if you're looking at being an end, now, if we step back and consider, well, you can't, if you were to do that now, then obviously you're going to lead towards some kind of poverty, as it were, material deprivation. But we're dealing with a spiritual deprivation or a spiritual poverty. So, and this is why I always come back, that the way how that you can temporalize as an end has to be done with other people, because then you're giving people the opportunity to do likewise, and you are creative, a kind of positive feedback loop, a positive mimesis. It's not predicated on, acquisitiveness of the spiritual aspiration of independence, but rather about temporalizing the indivisibility of your very being, as it were, and not being beholden to the marginality or to interest. in this regard. So if you are, because it's not, you can't say if you were to be an end, to act from an end. Can you say that you've got an interest towards other people being an end? Can you say that you have an interest in people doing that because, essentially you are a model for them? If people are working towards, and we presuppose the mimic nature of the way how this thing works, you have an interest. That's what you're focused on. Now, like I said, if interest is this predicated off being marginal, being a means towards an end, and yet we presuppose the end that we are, then all you're doing is just removing the temporalizing of the marginality and pushing people towards basically living their lives holistically. So that holism is, there's no interest in holism when you're looking at it in that manner, because interest is presupposes there's an angle that you're working on. But if the way how you're addressing it is literally to remove the marginality of the way how you receive yourself, so is literally to remove the interest that we presuppose when we turn ourselves into a means to an end, then it cannot be substantiated that a person being temporalizing an end for themselves, they have an interest for other people to do it. Because it's the way how that you are giving of your life. If you give of your life and then the way how you receive your life. So if you're giving of your life holistically towards a way of life, and it's the way towards life, what you're potentializing is the way. So if our way is to be market orientated, is to wants are primary because money is a given and we are a means towards the end that we presuppose, then when you're looking at the way how you can potentialize the indivisibility of your temporality by potentializing your time beyond the economic good, then what you're doing is that you're literally undermining the marginality and of the interest that would work. Because I always say that the only way that a person gets compromised to be leveraged in life through money is because we've made ourselves marginal to begin with, because we've turned ourselves in a means towards the end. How could a person with come and you prostitute yourself, as it were, because you presuppose an end for life for yourself, and so therefore you've got these certain principles, but then the devil comes along to test you as far as that goes. So you are marginal in the sense that you're temporalizing a division between yourself, a means towards an end, because we acculturate our children into this way of life for them to be marginal like us and for them to eventually be compromised through that marginality. It just works. You can't compromise a person that's never been marginalized to begin with. People don't understand that, because you literally are creating a division between people's temporality, and this is the cultural kind of snare that we're dealing with. Because when you remove the divisibility, as it were, so because we're indivisible, then you literally are removing the way towards how people can be compromised, because it presupposes that they're harnessing their agency, the full scope of their agency, which it doesn't allow, say, niches to flourish where power can kind of hide, as it were. Because if you are a creator of the life, or of our world, then would you create, if everybody had the intentionality of the love that we are orientated towards in our life, now, how could we engender a world where we create nuclear weapons or anything that is just antithetical to what we as like no ones would hold out for ourselves? Because we don't harness the full scope of our creativity, we create niches for power, for a power removed from myself. Like I keep on saying, it's a power removed. That power that animates, that will try to leverage over your life, is literally the power that you don't animate in your life. And because people are preoccupied with the independence from a way of life rather than looking at a common surpassing that is basically getting all that potential power, that creative force, and harnessing it the marginal way how we receive ourselves to create a new way of life, you are beholden to a power that's outside. And this has been throughout history. This is without exception. There is no culture that has democratized creativity. All right, democracy, the way how we understand it, it's just decision-making process. But if we've moved from material deprivation to a spiritual deprivation, to an existential question. Like, the crisis here is just an existential crisis about what the fuck are we doing? What is the meaning of life? What is it? Is my life just to buy shit and to die and to pay taxes and that's it? I mean, is that what it is? All right. Now, when people get beholden to causes, well, the cause is outside themselves. So they're not really looking at the way how they're beholden to what they consider to be an issue in the world. But once again, and you can only have to look at my other podcast when I deal with the nature of the injustice that we accept for ourselves. But if you work back and think of, okay, there's enough people in the world that understand that they do create the world, that we're responsible for it. Conscious consumption and all these other things, it just highlights, it's a trend in consciousness, if you can call it that. It's just awareness that people are awakening to this. So as a result of that, they're not accepting things that they wouldn't do maybe accept anymore because of that. But then the thing here is that there's one thing to roll against the world that you see it, but if you don't know the underlying cause and the way how that you can actually harness the full scope of your creativity, and yet you're still beholden, because a lot of spiritual people are still beholden to kind of unavowed utopianism or even mysticism and all these other things when you're not potentializing the culture. And I've said this prior about there's one thing to have a spiritual experience, but if that does not potentialize the relationality that you share with other people, but if the way how that the relationality works is on a vertical axis rather than a horizontal axis, and so literally everybody is singing praise to God, I mean, what the fuck's that? I mean, how is that helping where you are? Why the fuck does God need to be praised? Even if, let's say, why would God need to be praised? God doesn't need to be praised. You can do God's work, if I'm going to put it in that work. If we're talking about like love and stuff, we're talking about the gospel, as it were. Like, let's take Christ as an exemplar. Well, then it's the way how you demonstrate that temporally in history, the Spirit. And what is the Spirit? If we accept the Spirit as being indivisible, if we accept when we look at our children, that the children are meant to be orientated towards life to experience the indivisibility of life, of their life, the flourishing of life. So why do we presuppose that we have to make them a means towards the end? It's more representative of our culture or lack of culture, our bastardization and barbarism more than anything else. But because we accept it for ourselves, and that's been the way of life for maybe the last 100 years, we just think that it's just unsurpassable because we're beholden to an unavowed utopianism, and that means to say that history is ended and it's just all gravy. And yet, obviously, it's not. And because it comes back to the way how we give and the way how we receive. So if the way how we give and the way how we receive, it's all about the way how that you can potentialize reverence for life, gratitude, to experience awe and mystery and wonder at life. Now, how do we potentialize those kind of things that are evocative of what it means to be born? We've turned life into business. We turn life into a business to make a living, to make something living, not yourself, maybe like a simulation of yourself, what you consider yourself to be, but it's not like you, depending on where you sit on the spectrum, as it were. It's like it's a phantasm, as it were. Maybe it's just an apparition of self. If we're temporalizing our marginality, this is where I'm going with it. That's why we can never really share the world with other people, because we're always marginal, because we're beholden to an unavowed utopianism, and people can't even see it. And because they can't see it, people are never truly there. Like I said, they're never an end. You are always a means towards an end. And so you get glimpses of people that just, incarnate beyond the marginal way that they come towards us. We allow that. We have these glimpses of people all the time. We get it. That cuts through our way of life all the time. But it's what underwrites those little moments is the issue. It's the fucking way. And so if you recognize that, then it's just acknowledging that we don't necessarily need to be beholden to the way. We can temporalize potentialize our talent beyond the economic good to temporalize place, and that gives the ability of all those moments that we see, that we recognize when a person is there, when you are there, when you're present. All right, it's so fucking difficult now with people with their heads in the phone. They're never temporalizing place if you've got your head in the phone. It just doesn't bode well for the world. Or maybe it will, because people will recognise that it's just we're falling away from life, and as a result of that falling away, the power that we don't animate in our life is now coming to the fore, and it's really Leviathan's basically on the land, and it's just going to fucking, it's just going to ensnare us even more, and we are responsible for it because we don't animate the power that we have within us, and so as a result of that, that power is going to be animated anyway. Because we create the world. We might be fucking no ones. We might think we have no power, but we have all the power in the world. All right, we have all the power in the world, and yet because people think that they don't have any, well, they don't have any. And because they're beholden to a way of life, they're beholden to a way of life. But you got to potentialize, I suppose, the question, and then to throw that into relief and to see what is open to us. And that's all I fucking talk about. Anyway, until next time, take care.